Hey everybody, this is Dr. McManaman, and today we're talking home exercises. We're going to pivot a little bit. We've spent a lot of time on the spine, talking about different stretches and exercises to help strengthen you up and prevent injury. What we're going to do today is focus on a condition that affects the elbow and the wrist. That condition is called medial and lateral epicondylitis. You may have heard it called golfer's and tennis elbow. So we're going to talk about two different treatment options with those conditions. Before we do that, I want you to check this out. Hey guys, we're about ready to start discussing some of the treatment options for golfer's elbow and tennis elbow, but I wanted to spend just a minute or two discussing how those injuries occur in the first place. So golfer's elbow, or medial epicondylitis, again, is named for the action of swinging a golf club. So when you're bringing that golf club through, towards the end of that swing, you really flex that wrist, which contracts the muscles in the forearm that run up to a common tendon in the medial part of your elbow, or that inside part of your elbow. And that forced contraction, if that muscle is not strong enough, can create some micro trauma in that area. So you think about that golf swing, you're coming through, forced flexion of the wrist, causing that muscle to contract, and then you come through with your golf swing. It puts a lot of strain on there. And those are just muscles that we don't work very often. So oftentimes they're weak and they can't withstand that kind of force. And so you get micro trauma that builds up in there, until you eventually have a lot of inflammation in an event that builds up. You might have some scar tissue in there. And that's how that injury occurs. You also see it in baseball players or people who are throwing or doing this kind of motion. Again, that forced flexion of that wrist puts a lot of strain on that inside of the elbow. And the same is true for tennis elbow. It's named because of the action of a backhand. So when you're bringing that backhand through on that tennis swing, you're extending that wrist. You're doing a forceful extension of that wrist, and that's causing the outside part of your elbow, that common tendon out there, to contract. And again, if that muscle is not strong enough, you're going to have that wear and tear, that chronic overuse. And eventually when these conditions start to rear their head, it's very painful. And so we go in, we do some soft tissue techniques. We start building back those muscles, and we strengthen them up. And that's kind of how we attack those injuries. So I just want to give you a little better understanding of those so you know what to watch for. And so with that, let's get into the treatment options. At the beginning of the video, I had mentioned initially with these type of injuries, what I like to do is some soft tissue work, break up some of that scar tissue that's in there, get that muscle freed up a little bit. And so one of the ways you can do that is with a frozen water bottle. So most people have a bottle of water around the house. What you're going to do is you're going to put this down. You're going to find that inside part of your elbow, so the middle part of your elbow. So you're going to be going palm down with this. And you're going to get that water bottle right on there. Now these muscles, they go all the way from the elbow to the palm and into the fingers even. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply some pretty decent pressure into that water bottle, and we're just going to roll that arm up and down. We're going to roll through that forearm. This could be a little tender initially if this injury is really bothering you. But we're just going to roll up and down that water bottle, breaking up some of that soft tissue. You can find some of those tough spots and kind of hone in on those and work through some of those tough spots. But we're just rolling that forearm through that water bottle all the way down to the wrist. So from the medial elbow all the way down to that wrist. Now, to do the lateral epicondyle for tennis elbow, you're going to do the same thing, except you're going to flip your arm palm up. That's going to get you to those extensor muscles out here. So you're going to do the same thing. You're going to put your elbow down on that water bottle, and you're going to apply some pretty firm pressure. You're just going to start rolling up and down that water bottle all the way through the wrist. Find those tough spots and kind of hone in on them and get just some of those tough knots broke up. I love using the water bottle because it's got the ribs in there, which helps work through some of those soft tissue spots. It's also nice and cold, so you're also icing, so you're controlling inflammation as well. So that's one way that you can do soft tissue work. You can use a tennis ball as well, but my preferred method is to use a water bottle. Okay guys, so at the beginning of the video I mentioned there was a couple different ways that we were going to treat this, and the second part of that was through strengthening exercises. And there's a few different ways that you can do that. I'm going to demonstrate a couple of them. You can use a dumbbell. 2 to 3 pounds is more than enough. You can use a resistance or a TheraBand. or you can use just a can of food that you have up in the cupboard. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can do the strengthening exercises, and it doesn't have to be a lot of weight. What we're looking to do is just isolate out that wrist and do some easy eccentric muscle contractions. We're going to go over that right now. So I have a weight here that I'm going to demonstrate first, and so this is going to be for that flexor tendon. So on the inside part of that elbow is what we're wanting to work. So you're going to start with that wrist flexed, so with the wrist tipped back towards you. And what you're going to do while you're stabilizing at the elbow, you want all the action coming from the wrist, is you're just going to slowly lengthen that muscle. You're going to extend that wrist as far as you can. Now it's important when you get to this point that you don't flex it back up. When you get to this point, you want to use your other hand and you're going to lift. And then again, stabilize at the elbow and slowly lower. And you'll do about 7 to 10 reps of this. You can do it a few times a day, but you're just slowly lengthening that muscle, nice and controlled, making sure all the motion is coming from the wrist and not the shoulder or the elbow. So to do the outside part of your elbow, then it's just the exact opposite. So you're going to roll your arm over so it's facing palm down. You're going to have that wrist extended this time. You're going to again stabilize at the elbow, and you're going to slowly lower that wrist into a flexed position. You're going to take your opposite hand, you're going to lift, stabilize, and then slowly lower. And that is how to do an eccentric muscle strengthening exercise for medial and lateral epicondylitis. Okay, so I mentioned there was a couple different ways that you could do the strengthening exercise, and one was with a resistance or a TheraBand. So I have one here. I have it pinned under the leg of this table. But what you want to do is you want to get a decent amount of resistance, and you're just doing the same thing as you would have done with the dumbbell. So again, if we're doing the inside part of that elbow or the medial epicondyle, what we're going to do is we're going to get that wrist bent towards you, so flexed towards you, and we're just going to slowly lower the wrist against that resistance from the band. When we get to where that muscle is fully lengthened, we're using our opposite hand to lift it back up, and then you're going to slowly lower again. And again, 7 to 10 reps, a few times a day would be perfect for this. To do the outside of the elbow, or the lateral epicondyle, you're just going to do the exact opposite. So your wrist is going to go so that it's facing down, or your palm down. You're going to have that wrist extended. Again, we're stabilizing at the elbow, so all the motion is coming from that wrist. And we're slowly lengthening that muscle, lowering all the way down. And taking our opposite hand, lifting that wrist back up, and then slowly lowering back down. And that is how you do a strengthening exercise with eccentric muscle contraction using a TheraBand.